Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. We are delighted today to have as our guest David Ariano, who is the President of Ravinia Plumbing, Sewer, Heating, and Electric, based in Lincolnshire, Illinois. They're a family-owned business which has been operating in the Chicago's North Shore and the surrounding suburbs since 1928. That's right, over 90 years. David is, in fact, the third-generation owner, and since David joined the company back in 1994, he's grown the company from 16 employees to over 76 employees. And as the company's grown, they've acquired other companies, other plumbing companies, HVAC, electrical companies, basically bringing everything in-house to create a very integral and seamless experience for their customers to make it really simple and easy to service everybody that they're working with. What's amazing is that not only has this company a 7-time winner of the Carrier's President's Award, they've received numerous times the Angie Super Service Award. They've been part of the prestigious Best Picks company for over 10 years, and they're also A-plus rated with the Better Business Bureau. What's really amazing is David is a true champion for small businesses and shares his experience and knowledge with younger contractors as 3-time past president of the Plumbing Contractors Association of Northern Illinois, as well as the current president of the Plumbing Council. So, David, we're excited to have you on the show today. Welcome.
Thank you.
Excellent. Let's just jump right into it. Summer's coming around here pretty soon. We're just about to hit spring here in the Chicagoland area. Tell us about Ravinia Plumbing, Sewer, Heating, Electric, and how you're helping customers to get prepared for summer.
So there's a couple things that we can do. Obviously, you got some rain coming up. It rains every spring, so you want to make sure that your primary and backup sump pumps work. Of course, then it's going to start getting warmer into summer, and you want to make sure that your air conditioner has been tuned up and the filters have been changed so that your system is capable of running efficiently, not consuming more electricity than it should over the summer months.
That's great advice. Is there things that people should be looking for as they're kind of getting things prepared? And sometimes maybe you turn on the AC for the first time and you hear a funny noise. Are there certain things that you find that might be signs that maybe something needs to be changed or something needs to be worked on an air conditioning unit, or maybe even possibly someone might just need a brand new one?
Sure. So, air conditioning units themselves, the average life is probably somewhere around 15 years, assuming it was installed properly and properly maintained, meaning it's been cleaned and serviced annually. So assuming, that's about how long the average unit lasts. So there's several things that you can do to make sure that your air conditioner, is operating properly. A few things that homeowners can do themselves that they don't have to pay a professional for. At the very least, you want to make sure that you don't have any shrubbery or other plants growing too close to the outdoor air conditioning condensing unit. You want all that stuff to be a good 2 feet at least away from the unit so that there's proper airflow around the unit. Also, you want to make sure that that the outside unit's clean. You can clean the coils off with a garden hose. You don't want to use too much pressure. You don't want to scrub the outside coils or anything because if you bend the fins that help exchange the heat, you could damage or destroy the unit.
So, David, could you explain some of the signs that someone may need a new air conditioning unit and some of the things they can do to make sure the unit's up and running and ready to go for summer?
Sure. There's a couple of things you can do. The first is to make sure that the filters in the furnace are clean. If you have a 1-inch thick filter, those filters need to be changed every month. If it's a 4 or 5-inch thick filter, those filters should be changed twice a year. And now regarding the outdoor air conditioning condensing unit, those coils get dirty over time. They need to be cleaned, but you have to be very careful the way you clean them. Don't clean them with a pressure washer or with high pressure water. You just want to give it a rinse with a garden hose. If they're very dirty, then you're going to need a professional to professionally clean them with a special type of coil cleaner. Don't scrub the fins because if you bend them over, you'll damage or destroy the air conditioner. The other thing you want to make sure is that you don't have any plants or shrubs that are growing too close to the condensing unit. You want to keep all that stuff a good 2 feet away from the condenser so that there is enough room for proper airflow so that the unit can work efficiently.
That's great. I didn't even realize that those little fins on the outside there are so crucial to not be bent. You just think that, air is just going to flow in and, I'm just going to scrub them or clean them up because they do get filthy over time. So that's pretty amazing. Why is it that those little fins make such a big difference?
The way an air conditioner works is the system is absorbing the heat inside of your home, and that heat is being ejected to the outside. There's some physics at play as to why you can take heat from inside your home that might be 70 degrees and still be able to expel that heat outside when it's 90 or 100 degrees, but there's some gas laws that get into that whole thing. So in any case, all those fins are part of the heat exchanger, right? So you're trying to exchange the heat from the refrigerant that's flowing through that heat exchanger to the surrounding outside. So the higher the efficiency, the larger or the more surface area your heat exchanger is going to have. And if you start bending those fins over, you just reduce the efficiency and the ability for the system to cool to its fullest capacity.
Which then puts more pressure on the condenser, on the motor, and so forth, which will eventually make them burn out faster, is what I'm guessing.
Exactly right. The harder you make the system work, the more electricity it consumes, the harder the compressor has to work, and the shorter the overall life of the system.
Got it. Makes sense. Makes total sense. Are there any other signs that people can put it on their radar screen that might tell them that maybe their unit is about to go? They don't want to be stuck in 105-degree weather in Chicago in the middle and have it go out. So are there some other signs that they can look for?
There are a number of other signs that we as professionals look for that's going to be pretty hard for a consumer to look for, because there's a couple of components inside the condensing unit that we check. One is the contactor, which is basically a relay switch. Those will get pitted over time and fail. There are start and run capacitors that will wear out over time, but you have to be very careful. I do not recommend reaching in to the area of the condensing unit that contains those components, because those components operate at somewhere between 20 to 60 amps at 240 volts. So if you accidentally touch anything in there when it's live, you'll be lucky if it doesn't kill you. So
wow.
You really need to know what you're doing before you start nosing around inside the condensing unit.
Got it. One of the things that I've noticed in home ownership is sometimes when you're kicking it off for the first time, the lines freeze up. Maybe, I don't know if I'm cranking the AC way too low too fast, but I find that there's a lot of ice that forms on those pipes from the condenser that's going into the house. Is that a sign that it's going bad, or is that just something that I'm turning things on right?
Right. No, it's definitely a sign of a problem. So there's a number of reasons why that can happen. One of them is if you don't have enough airflow through your system. So if your filters are dirty or if you've closed down registers, then what happens is the face of evaporator coil, which is the other half of the air conditioner that's inside the house that absorbs the heat. If you don't have enough airflow going over that system, that coil can get too cold, below freezing. And then when your air conditioner is running, it's doing two things. It's not only cooling the air, but it's also dehumidifying the air. So that humidity comes out as moisture that's collected on the face of that evaporator coil. And if the coil gets too cold, that moisture, instead of running off of the coil, will freeze on the coil, and then it lets ice start building down, up that line set to the outside condensing unit. It can also happen if the system is low on refrigerant. It can happen if there's a restriction somewhere in the refrigerant circuit. So there's a couple other things, but most of those are problems that you're going to need a professional for.
Got it. Okay, good. That's good to know. So kind of what I'm hearing here is that for a lot of these things, you almost need to have like an air conditioning tune-up or a checkup of some sort, because there's a lot of things that could be going wrong that me as a layperson couldn't do on my own, where I need a professional like yourself to come out there. Would that be a correct assumption?
Right. I mean, certainly some of the problems that we described earlier, the things to look for earlier, those are all things that we look at. Regarding proper refrigerant charge for your system, the system isn't charged properly. Sometimes they were just never charged properly from the day they were installed, or some systems can develop a small refrigerant leak over time. So if the charge is off by only a little bit, it will make the system run harder, requiring more electricity to get the same amount of cooling out of the system. So there's a drop in efficiency, which creates higher electric bills. And if the refrigerant level drops too much, then not only are you paying more on electricity, but you're also losing cooling capacity. And finally, if it drops enough, then it's going to start freezing up, like we described earlier.
Right. Makes sense. Okay.
So you can have a problem with a refrigerant charge, and it's not something you might not ever notice, but it's going to cost you more money over time to operate.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. And if I understand it correctly, there are a few different types of refrigerants out there now too, correct? And some are being phased out?
Right. So the refrigerant that's been around the longest now is referred to as Freon or R22. So that refrigerant has been completely phased out. It's still available. We're not allowed to manufacture it anymore. So the refrigerant that's available is largely either inventory from when they were making it back prior to the 1st of 2020, or anything that's reclaimed from old units, cleaned and resold. So because that refrigerant is in short supply, its cost has gone up quite a bit. Fortunately, the replacement refrigerant, which is commonly referred to as Puron or R410A, that refrigerant's been out for, over 12 years now. So we've been installing systems containing R410A for over 12 years. So most of our customers don't really have to worry about R22. It's just older systems. So if you run across a system, an R22 system that does need some refrigerant, it's usually not a good idea to waste the money on very expensive R22. You're better off putting that money to a new system.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it's great that you saw, the writing on the wall and kind of got ahead of the curve and made sure that you've been putting on these systems a lot longer than it's been around. So that's great. So I'm sure your customers are very happy with that. If you get a tune-up, you find out that there's an issue, it's going to be very costly to fix or get my AC running. What do you feel are some of the biggest myths out there when it comes to people that are going out to buy a new AC unit because they realize that they need a new one?
Sure. So the first thing is, in America, everyone believes that bigger is better, which is not the case with air conditioning. It's the exact opposite. So
interesting.
Yeah, so it's very important to properly size an air conditioner for the home that it's cooling. There's a lot of science that goes into that. The actual science is referred to as a manual J heat and cooling load calculation. And there's calculations that we as professionals do to figure out exactly how much heat or cooling a particular structure needs. And that, of course, changes from location to location. So, for example, the exact same house in Chicago will need less cooling than the exact same house in Phoenix, Arizona, which has a different cooling load than a house in Georgia, right? Because Phoenix gets very hot, but it's a dry heat. Georgia also gets hot, but there's a lot of moisture. So you'd have the same house in 3 locations, but you would have 3 different size air conditioners. Now, older, less efficient air conditioning equipment was much less sensitive to proper sizing and to proper airflow. All of the equipment made today is much more efficient than the stuff that was made 15, 20 years ago as mandated by the federal government. So while everyone benefits by having higher efficient equipment that consumes less electricity, it's much more critical that the entire HVAC system was sized and installed properly from day one. And sometimes what happens is we run into homes where we resize the system, we put the correct size air conditioner in, but maybe the ductwork that's in the house just doesn't support all of that. It doesn't support the right amount of cooling. So sometimes, we have to, as professionals, we need to go in and add and install additional ductwork. And of course the customer says, well, why do I need that? I never needed it before. Well, it's because you can't buy that air conditioner that you have. You can only buy what's available today, and what's available today requires improvements to your system. That's one component. The other thing that a lot of customers don't necessarily understand is air conditioners are designed to maintain a certain temperature profile. So in the Chicagoland area, we design air conditioners to operate at a maximum of 93 degrees Fahrenheit. So if it's 93 degrees outside and your house is perfectly sized for a particular size air conditioner, then that air conditioner should run 100% of the time and not be able to cool the house below 75 degrees Fahrenheit.
Interesting.
Not everybody likes that, but there are variables to this whole equation. So air conditioners are made in increments of what are referred to as a half a ton of increment. So you can buy air conditioners that are 1.5 ton, 2, 2.5, 3, 3.5, 4, or 5 ton of cooling. But, of course, houses aren't built in half-ton increments. So your air conditioner is always going to be maybe a little bit oversized or a little bit undersized. And as professionals, we try to get as close as we can. And that, of course, dictates how cool you can make your house on the hottest days of the year. So if a customer says, hey, I want my house to be 68 degrees when it's 100 degrees outside, that means we have to oversize an air conditioner. And while that might just work just fine for those really hot days, all the rest of the days when it's 80 degrees outside, it's not going to work very efficiently and may not work at all. So you can't always give customers what they really want. We're bound by the physics that governs the way our universe works and the way this equipment operates. So
right, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Do you find that, maybe a solution for those customers that really want to have, their bedroom super cool because they want it at 68 degrees no matter how warm it is outside, to get an additional unit? Like I've seen those things where it's almost like a little box that's on the top of the ceiling, and it doesn't go through the ductwork. It's just its own standalone unit kind of thing. Do you find that that's a viable solution for special situations like that?
There are a couple things that can be done. So some systems can be zoned where you have your existing set of ductwork and then you can install different kind of zoning dampers so it forces all the heating or cooling into certain rooms. In the past, those systems didn't really work very well. They worked fine on furnaces, not so much on air conditioners, but today we have what are referred to as multi-stage air conditioners, which can up and down in capacity to match the capacity needed by a particular zone. So that's one option. The system that you were referring to a moment ago is referred to as a ductless mini-split system. So there's a self-contained evaporator blower unit that hangs on the wall, and that provides the cooling. So some of these standalone systems can cool lower if need be. So
makes sense. That's great. Are there any other common misconceptions that, maybe some of the Chicagoland homeowners have about either realizing they need a new AC unit or what they are experiencing when they are going about getting and buying a new one?
That's pretty much it for, I've described a couple of big things. Obviously the final component is there's a lot that goes into the sizing and installation, the proper installation of HVAC or heating, ventilation, and air conditioning equipment. It's not like buying a toaster or a stereo. If you want to buy a television, it doesn't really matter where you buy the television set from. As long as you can plug it into the wall and screw the cable connection into it, voila, you successfully installed a television.
Right.
But when you're installing a furnace and an air conditioner, you've got 3 different voltage lines. You've got control wiring. You've got 120-volt power wiring, and you've got 240-volt power wiring. You've got some additional control wiring. You've got gas piping and exhaust vent piping for your furnace. There's all the sheet metal work. You have the line sets that connect the outdoor air conditioning condensing coil to the indoor air conditioning evaporator coil. Those line sets have to be purged with nitrogen, pulled into a vacuum, and then properly charged. So there's a lot of shortcuts that can be taken, which a lot of companies do, because that's where you get, there's the lowest bid is basically cutting the most corners and giving you an improper installation that most customers won't always realize they received because they won't see the savings on their utility bills that they should, and or they'll have equipment that just won't last as long as it should, and or the system won't provide them all the comfort that it's capable of. So
right.
Right. I think you're going to say the old adage, you get what you pay for, and you want to make sure that you're hiring a professional who's going to stand behind their work and is going to do the right job for you the first time.
Right. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
Yep.
Makes sense. So can you share some examples of how your Ravinia's come in and gone in and really helped one of your customers reconfigure, you've got there and they realized that AC unit is on the fritz and maybe it was too big and you've helped them resize it or vice versa?
We run into that from time to time where we find furnaces that were oversized, and sometimes there are some things that we can do to derate the system so it's not overheating and short cycling and shortening the life of the equipment. There's not as much of that you can do on the air conditioning side, unfortunately. That's something that there's a little more latitude on the heating side of the equipment. But certainly we run into situations where they'll reuse line sets that weren't purged properly, so we can pull all the refrigerant out, pull the proper vacuum, recharge the system, get it working a little more efficiently. Another thing that people will tend to do is if there are rooms in the house that they're not using, they'll close off registers. That's always a bad thing to do because then you're restricting the airflow through the system, right? These systems are designed to see a certain amount of air that flows through the system, and when you starve these systems for air, you negatively affect the performance and their efficiency, and also cut down on their life. So sometimes customers will call up and the system isn't working properly, and then we'll go around, and sometimes the solution is as simple as opening up registers. There's maybe furniture that they put in front of registers. You got to move the furniture away. Sometimes we find registers that have these really nice fancy wood grills on them that are overly restrictive. We pull those off and put metal grills back in that allow for the proper airflow. So there's a number of things that the customers can look at just to make sure all the grills and returns are open and clean and whatnot.
Yeah, I always thought, you're going to save some money by not heating rooms you're not in or not cooling rooms you're in, but actually it's the total opposite, which is very interesting. I think a lot of our listeners are going to really appreciate that little nugget alone in their systems. It's great. I know, David, your company has been a family business for over 90 years. You're third generation. Have you always wanted to be in the business, or what got you started in the family business?
Well, I worked for my father, growing up, summers and weekends. I figured out pretty early on that I absolutely do not want to be in the business, so okay. I went and got myself a couple degrees in mechanical engineering, and I did that for a number of years and enjoyed it very much. And after doing that for a handful of years, my father approached me and gave me the sales pitch and kind of talked me into giving it a try, and I did, and that was 26 years ago. So far, so good.
Sounds like he was a good salesman.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's great. Can you share any lessons you learned early on that still impacts how you do business today?
Yeah. I was taught from an early age that if you tell somebody you're going to do something, you do it no matter what, because a person is only as good as their word. I've made a number of mistakes in my life, or maybe I've opened my mouth too soon, and then, well, it is what it is. I eat it. I follow through and I do what I say I'm going to do, no matter what kind of pain I might have caused myself. But on the plus side, people tend to have more respect for individuals who, I guess, follow that philosophy.
Absolutely. I wish more companies had that same kind of philosophy, because you don't see that as much in this day and age. So that's great. I appreciate you sharing that. So what would you say is maybe the most important question that homeowners on the North Shore and the surrounding suburbs should ask themselves as they consider looking for a new AC unit and how to go about buying one?
Well, I guess the primary things to look for are just finding a good contractor, making sure the system was sized properly, that the contractor's going to stand behind the work, that they're going to be around to honor their warranties, and that their work is complete. So.
Makes sense. And are there any important things, like brands? I know some products, brands are everything. Do you find that to be the case, or do you find that, a lot of the top brands, they're all pretty much equal out there?
No, air conditioning systems and manufacturers kind of follow three tiers. There's the high-end tier, the stuff that's really well made, which comes in a number of price points. So typically Carrier and Bryant, Train, American Standard, those are kind of the top tier The next tier down tend to be, Lennox, Rheem, some of those products, and then on down from there. However, the worst piece of equipment properly installed will outlast and outperform the best equipment not installed properly. So it's not enough to buy really good equipment. You really need to have it installed properly.
Wow, that's very interesting. I wouldn't have thought that, but that makes a lot of sense. If it's not installed properly, especially with this day and age, with, like you were mentioning, having taken all those different factors and considerations to do it. If it's installed properly, it's going to last you great. If it's not, that's going to be the Achilles heel of the entire system.
Right.
Well, that's wonderful. Well, I appreciate all that you've shared with us. How can someone find out more about David Ariano and Ravinia Plumbing, Sewer, Heating, Electric, and how you can help them?
Probably the easiest way is to check us out on our website, which is raviniaplumbing.com. There's all kinds of information on that site. If you go to our blog page, you can search pretty much any topic that relates to plumbing, sewer, heating, or cooling, or electric, and there's information on there that can help somebody.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I found that your website does have a plethora of information, and you've really gone the extra mile to make sure that everybody can be educated on knowing what they're getting into. So that's fantastic. So, well, David, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. You've shared a wealth of information, and you really give a lot of golden nuggets for our listeners out there. So I really appreciate you being on the show today.
Well, thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. You're very welcome. So you have a great day. Well, there you have it, folks, for this edition of the show. We'll see you next time on The Inside Track.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.